intimate breath.
Hello there, I'm Laura Blanke from Intimate Breath, and I'm here with Jane Bennett, who I know from Natural Fertility, both a book as well as from kits that they're selling for natural conception and contraception. And she also wrote other books like About Bloody Time, A Blessing Not a Curse, and The Pill, Are You Sure It's For You? So she's an expert around hormonal birth control and cycle awareness, and also helping young girls to make a celebratory transition into womanhood. Is there anything you would like to add there, Jane?
It's fine, Laura. I think, some more will come out as we speak, but that's a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
And I'm super honored that you want to be here and talk with me about cycle awareness and fertility awareness. And I've prepared some questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
And the first one is about PMS, premenstrual syndrome, as well as PMDD, which is more about the irritability, the anxiety, the depression that might come up as a symptom before menstruation or maybe during menstruation. You know, my work is mainly around the emotional and the relational and also about the body awareness. But I have always seen those symptoms as a sign that I need something. I've always seen it as useful information. So I never had very severe PMS, but when I do have cramps or I do notice that my body is hurting somewhere, I know that generally it means I need to slow down and I need to retreat a little bit from the social, or I need some more warmth around my pelvis. And when I just breathe and actually connect with my body, generally it just fades away very quickly. And when it comes to irritability, I also know, I've always been in a situation where I live in my own space, I have an understanding partner, and when I can't stand being close anymore, I could just ask, and I knew that it was just showing me that I actually need something else than before. And I can just listen to that. But I'm aware that there might be other causes, and I've never had very, very strong problems with that. So I'm wondering, what have you been observing and noticing in your work and women with PMS and PMDD?
It's a huge topic, PMS and PMDD. Most women have some symptoms before their period. And there's at least 150 different symptoms that are attributed to PMS. So it's a very, and I think they probably even talk about some different, conditions, so to speak. And I think it really speaks to our perception of the whole cycle, because the hormonal cycle and the hormones that are delivered to us, that swim around in our bloodstream, are changing every day of the cycle, and in particular stages of the cycle they have whole different qualities. So before the period is a certain stage. Often for a lot of women that's perhaps the most difficult, maybe emotionally, often with some physical symptoms as well. And I think I really liked hearing what you had to say about it, in the sense that you felt confident to listen to your body, to listen to how you're feeling, to listen to your emotions and take care of yourself. And I think that is incredibly important, to be able to do that. And for a lot of women, it's even starting to think about giving themselves permission to do that is a step, because perhaps they've never bumped into that. They've never had that suggested to them. It never was suggested to them when they were a girl, just first starting to menstruate, that it was valuable to do that, because for most of us that is overridden. Either there's no conversation about it at all, or we're told, oh, it's just what happens. You just have to, be silent and grin and bear it, or whatever. So there's an incredible variation of women's sense of being able to be present with what they're feeling. I also like what you said, is that for you it seemed to be that by being able to value and respect what was coming up, either physically or emotionally for you, it helped a lot. It made a difference. And I think that is, on one hand, very simple and very profound as well. And I think the symptoms for a lot of women are actually more difficult, and they find that stage of their cycle a lot harder because they're in a fight with it. They're in a, they're trying to ignore it, and that actually makes it worse. And perhaps their work situation makes that harder, perhaps their family situation makes that harder. But the first step of all is to give ourselves permission to, just a minute, can I just listen to what's going on? Even if I feel I can't do much about it, what do I need now? Is there some small thing I can do to help myself? And, sometimes those small things can grow, and we start to actually make changes in our lives that help us have that sense of permission and have that sense of respect for our own cycle. So I think in my experience, that's perhaps, if we're just going to generalize, and of course there are people that have very extreme biochemical disturbance that really can bring very extreme experiences, and I think that very much needs professional help. And there are other people who perhaps their nutritional status can get in the way and make their PMS symptoms worse. So there's certainly a place for health professionals, and for looking at diet and lifestyle and so on can be very helpful. Acupuncture can be marvelous. Western or Chinese or Ayurvedic herbs can be fantastic too. So, but whatever is a comfortable therapy for people. Some people find, a good yoga class can make all the difference, or targeted yoga can be fabulous. So there are many things that can help us work with these particular symptoms. That said, I think the core of all is to respect what's coming up, respect this stage and what we experience at this stage of our cycle as valuable and important as the other stages. For a lot of women, maybe the week after the period is the easiest of the cycle, or around ovulation is the easiest. We sort of, the energy is rising. For a lot of women, they feel more positive. They don't have the symptoms of PMS. It's easier to feel like Superwoman, actually. It's easier to have all our plates spinning, and, I'm managing my career and the family and my relationship, and, I feel good about all of this. A couple of weeks later, that's all the cracks are starting, all the stresses of that are starting to appear. And it's harder to feel good about being that person. However, there are some really important parts of that cycle within us to listen to and to understand and to work with those variations, even if that's just a little bit each time. It's actually really valuable to pay attention to that.
I resonate very much with this last part, especially where in the beginning, the luteal phase, this the autumn and the winter premenstrual time. I didn't like entering that at all, and now they're actually definitely one of my favorite. It's such a valuable time to look back, to reflect, to slow down, to feel yourself in a different way, and to actually have this kind of energy also of like, what isn't working here? What needs to change? There's just another strength in there. that it feels very different from the week after menstruation, but it's also very strong. And I think often when women do acknowledge that there is PMS and or that they have a difficult time, it's often from a place of disempowerment, like being a victim of this curse that we have, and to actually acknowledge, yes, I am in this premenstrual phase right now, but I can start listening, and I can start being curious to what do I want here? What do I need here? What can I change to actually feel more empowered again? And actually, I want to transition to talking about irregular cycles, because it's a little bit the same for me there. I come from a time where I've had a few years of experimenting with different diets, being completely vegan, raw food, fasting a lot, and my cycle wasn't really happy there. So I had very irregular cycles, and I also had a period of more than 6 months of having no menstruation at all. And right now it's more steady, but it's still, I mean, it's not super regular. Sometimes it's a bit shorter, sometimes it's a bit longer, and I have never really seen that as a problem, because I can see often why it is. Like I couldn't surrender completely. I didn't feel fully safe in my environment. I've traveled, something drastically changed in my relationship life or in my diet. I would say, in that time when I didn't have any cycle, my body somehow didn't feel well enough or thriving enough to actually think about reproducing. So there's something there that needs to change. But I'm curious, what would you say about this to women with an irregular cycle? Your view on that?
It's it's a tricky question, because there's, on one hand, what I think it's really important that women understand and appreciate their own cycle, whatever it is, and not get too caught up in some perfection. I think it's also really valuable to understand what that means. I have heard from some women over the years who, have perhaps limited understanding of what a cycle is meant to be, and think that they're all meant to be 28 days. and even if they're a little bit, a couple of days either side of that, think, oh, it's really irregular, and get very worried about that. Whereas actually that's quite normal. And then there are other women, of course, who might have, a very irregular cycle, which means it might be a couple of months between a cycle, or it's a short and then long. It really varying a lot, which makes it very unpredictable, which can be, a little bit disturbing. I think it's important to start where you're at. One of the important considerations with an irregular cycle, if a woman is planning to conceive, that makes it difficult. It makes it difficult to time conception, and also there is an indication of a hormonal imbalance. So she's not in the best reproductive health, and that may interfere with her capacity to conceive well. So that's a consideration. And so in that case, it's important, it might be really valuable to see a suitably qualified and experienced health practitioner. I would hope with, certain naturopathic skills, so able to really look well at, nutrition, perhaps using herbs that really can make a great difference and be a really great boost to the endocrine system and to the hormone producing system. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, as kind of very much related to what we were talking about with PMS, is really paying attention to, respecting, honoring one's own cycle. What you mentioned about yours with changes of diet and changes of emotional situation, you've noticed that that impacts your cycles being regular or irregular. And of course, those are classic things that can make a difference, including travel you mentioned. So traveling, particularly across time zones, can make a difference. Now, of course, someone may be listening to this and say, well, you know, my cycle's been just spot on every month for years, and I've done all those things too. We're all different, you know, so some people just will have a very regular cycle. And for others, perhaps like you, it's been more sensitive to those big changes in life. So in that instance, I would say it's important to start from that place of kindness, that place of awareness, or why might it be doing this? Is this right for my body? For instance, you know, if you know, obviously I have no idea where you're at reproductively when you might be wanting to have children or conceive. But if you were leading up to that time, that would not be a time to fast or change your diet in a dramatic way, because you're wanting to create a very stable environment for your ovaries, for your endocrine system to be able to really establish a nice rhythm. But for you, you know, when you're not at that stage, you may be very happy to, you know, be trying out and experimenting with these other things for other reasons. So, you know, we make these decisions. But in your case, and this may be true for others, I'm sorry to focus on your story, but there it is. But in your case, you know, you were, you know, became aware of the impact of those changes, and I think that's very valuable. So it's a way of getting to know yourself. I'm sensitive to this, I'm sensitive to that. What are the things that nourish me and help me feel, you know, my whole body feel sort of comfortable to be able to cycle in a nice regular way. But it's, the thing is with the cycle, it is sensitive. Everyone's cycle is sensitive. It is going to change. It's different in our 20s, it's different in our 30s, it's different with life changes. It certainly changes you know, during our 40s in peri-menopause, and depending when someone actually goes through menopause. And I think this is one of the, perhaps the challenges, but also the exquisite key of having a menstrual cycle. It changes, and by observing it and paying attention to it, we're all the time learning about ourselves. And it's a little bit like, we can have a menstrual cycle and pay minimum attention for the decades that we have it. You know, just manage the bleeding. If we have painful or difficult symptoms, just manage those in as basic a way as possible and ignore it as much as possible. And we can live with that. But a little bit like, you know, you're sort of very aware of breath work. So a little bit like, we can go right through life without paying attention to our breath, except if we get short of breath, or, you know, or an illness is affecting our breath. However, for everyone who has spent a little bit of time in a yoga class or a meditation where there has been a focus on the breath, a very intentional breath, an intentional use of breath for awareness purposes or therapeutic purposes, how powerful that is, how powerful awareness is. And while the menstrual cycle is something very different, it's similar in terms of awareness. So by, you know, giving our, you know, kind and loving attention to our cycle, to ourselves through our cycle, it's an incredible tool for getting to know ourselves, as well as having some very practical purposes. But it's for those women I know who do that, it really is a treasured way of growing and learning and understanding themselves and working with their whole being.
Yeah. I recently had the question also from someone, because my excuse for having you here is that I'm having a course around cyclical living. And there was a woman that asked, so why would I actually be interested in learning about this if I don't have any problems around the cycle? And I love how you just explained it here. It's you can walk through life not ever noticing what is really going on there. But what about harnessing all the beautiful qualities and all like the gift in it, because it's there already. Yeah, and I'm curious also because you mentioned menopause, and we talked about irregular cycles, and my experience as well as some of my friends' experience is that becoming cycle aware, tracking the cycle, also helps to balance irregular cycles, and maybe also in the transition to menopause. I met a woman on a retreat a few years ago, and she was very early in that transition, I think 35. And she said, I need to get to know my cycle before it's actually ending. I need to get to know my body in this way. And I noticed that it's helping me to actually make that transition smoother. So I'm wondering, is that also what you're observing or your own experience?
Yes, both. I think because in my observing of other women is for women who have paid attention to their cycle, and in all the variations in whether they can do it a little bit or a lot, or don't have much time, but just in whatever way that's realistic for them, are able to perhaps attend to the different stages of their cycle for some time. So if and that's like exercising a muscle. And that the awareness that we were talking about before, by having that awareness, exercising that muscle. So when a woman starts to go through perimenopause and approaching menopause, it's a muscle that's really useful to have, because she's able to notice what's happening in her body, to have awareness of what she might need, what will help. She's possibly already accessed some helpful therapies or helpful practices that she's found beneficial, so she might go toward those. She already has the attitude of, if it's beyond what I can do, I can get help. I can talk to other people. I can find the information or find the practitioner that can help me. So this muscle, I've really noticed. So women, as you'd be aware, women have an extraordinary breadth of diversity in terms of their experience of menopause, as with menstruation. So for some it might be easy, a breeze, not a whole lot of symptoms, or really virtually nothing, all the way through. Some will have different symptoms, different emotional, different physical aspects, all the way through to women who have hot flushes totally for the rest of their life, really well into their 80s and beyond. So and serious depression, there's a whole lot of different things that can happen. But I have noticed for women who already have practiced menstrual cycle awareness in whatever personal way that has worked for them, it's definitely made a difference to their capacity to work with menopause, whatever their symptoms, and travel that in with greater well-being, greater sense of positivity, greater sense of empowerment, greater sense of being able to do what they need and find what they need to have that happen in a way that works for them. So I think it's very connected, the capacity to do that well.
Beautiful. It's beautiful to hear you talk about this. It's a little far from where I'm at, but I always love women talk about how that was for them as well. Yeah. And yeah, so menopause is it's a transition phase, and then for young girls it's also a big transition, starting their like having menarche, starting their cyclical life. And for me personally, that was also a very turbulent time emotionally, and I think for a lot of teenagers it's just so vulnerable to have a changing body, and to find your place also relationally and socially, and I would love to talk about the pill. And actually, I'm not at all experienced with the pill. I've never taken a pill. To be frank, I always saw it as something very bad. I wanted to stay away from it. Now I know it's not that black and white, and I can also totally understand that people take the pill. It seems very easy, not having to think about condoms and thermometers and anything like that. One of my worries when I think about young girls starting to take the pill, often not for contraception or birth control, but for maybe skin problems or other symptoms around menstruation. I worry hearing that they never got to know their mature female body, that they never got to know how their cycle is working without that birth control, hormonal birth control. So I'm wondering, what have you noticed there? What do you want to say about that?
Well, obviously I have great concerns about hormonal contraception, and in a way we can use the term the pill, but there's many forms of delivery of synthetic hormones now. So there is a pill, there's an implant, there's injections, there's a skin patch, there's a vaginal ring that just goes up around around the cervix, and there's IUDs that release hormones. So from memory, I think that's pretty much it at the moment. And they might be different formulations, but they are all synthetic hormones. And hormones in our body are incredibly sensitive. And such tiny quantities can produce such profound responses. And anyone who has felt perhaps out of balance hormonally will really recognize that feeling of hormonal change. And when we feel not hormonally static, because our hormones are always changing, but when it's happening in a healthy rhythm and healthy quantities, and our estrogen and progesterone are happening in the right amounts, we really get a great sense of well-being and a great sense of sort of energy and creativity and capacity, and openness in our relationships and so on. But the other aspect of the pill is, as you said, it exists, it's in the world, and many millions of women are using. I'll use the pill cover all of those. And I really respect that. There are many reasons that they may be wanting to use those, whether it's for contraception or for therapy, or it's been prescribed to them and it may be helping with some of their symptoms. And I truly respect that. We need to, everyone needs to make decisions about their own health according to what's best for them. That said, what I would like to see is that those decisions are made from a place of informed choice, so that there's information about what those drugs, what those synthetic hormones do, and the understanding of what they can offer, but also what a really good understanding of what the side effects are. And in most cases, I don't feel that's happening truly, because I've known women that might have had symptoms for 20 years, they've been on the pill. It's only when they came off that they realized, oh, it wasn't me, it was the pill. causing a whole lot of symptoms that actually changed their lives in a negative way, because they felt just this constant low-level depression, or a loss of libido, or impacts on their the impacts on their health conditions. Because one of the effects of the pill is that it will upset our nutritional status. And if we start taking the pill, say at 18 or 19, when all going well, we'd be pretty pumped up with good nutrition, that we may not notice those symptoms. But over time, the upset in our nutritional status will get more and more extreme, and some things will become higher, some things will become lower, like zinc. And whatever our natural health weaknesses will start to show up more and more. But we and our doctors very often don't put those together as coming from the pill, because they just start to come on. And everyone will have their own individual versions of that. So, just coming back to the point I was making about informed choice, that's why I wrote, can I show you the book? So I did have it here. So this was the pill that I wrote with Alexandra Pope, called The Pill, Are You Sure It's For You? And you mentioned that before. And we're really trying to explore those particular points, and also look at the reasons that we are prescribed, or the reasons that we want to take or use these either for contraception or for therapeutic purposes, and sometimes both, and look at what the alternatives are.
Mm-hmm.
Because often we get the message that, oh, the pill is so easy, I don't have to think about condoms, and I don't have to do anything else. And that, I understand it can seem like the magic pill. Oh, that's so easy. Or especially what they call the long-acting contraception, or the LARCs, LARCs. We don't have to think about it at all. And that can seem just too simple. But, there are a lot of problems with these, and they can cause a lot more grief over time. And, with health problems, say the forms of contraception that are given sort of the highest level of success, because, and there's, we can't make a mistake, because we don't forget a pill, is the implant and the IUD that releases hormones. But they have the highest dropout rate. So very often women will get onto those, they'll find the side effects really unacceptable, they'll have them taken out, and then what are they going to do? So, what I really promote is, since for heterosexual women and couples, we need to, we're going to need contraception for many, many years of our life. So it's really valuable to become an expert in different forms of contraception. Different ones will suit us at different times. So we need to really understand them well. We need to make, they're all going to have their, we might have to be more aware with some of them. We might have to really understand side effects with other ones. But rather than being told, oh, don't worry, just do this, no problem. It's far better to understand our bodies. And of course, fertility awareness is an incredible tool for women to understand their bodies. The two main ways to do that is through mucus checking and through checking our temperature. And ultimately, mucus, if we've used the temperature method to really understand our post-ovulation symptoms, we can really fall back to just checking mucus. So it's a process of learning, which is usually very interesting anyway, and motivating because it's interesting. But it can become almost like once a woman has come to understand her signs of fertility, it can become just like we know when we're tired or when we're hungry, we can come to know it as simply as that. And that was my experience. I learned fertility awareness when I was 26, and I practiced it right through perimenopause, till I went through menopause. And the amazing thing for me was, because I was familiar with what my cervical mucus looked like at different times, even when my cycle became very irregular in perimenopause of the last, say, couple of years, whenever I saw the fertile mucus, and particularly the peak day mucus, for those who know what that means, the peak mucus, which indicates that ovulation will be the next day, and I'd see that and recognize it, and I'd go, okay, that's ovulation, that's when a period should come. And it did. And it was, to me, even after doing it all these years, it was like, oh my God, this stuff works even now. It was so clear. It was like a neon light, you know. And I think that for me and for so many women, it's so empowering to be able to know our own bodies. And the other thing with that is, it doesn't mean someone, you know, has to then, oh, if I'm using this, I can't use other contraception, I'm taking such a risk. There's no need to take risks. If you're not clear whether you're fertile or not, you use a barrier method. It's easy. But then it's through the practice. I mean, you can't describe to people chocolate cake. They have to try it. So similarly, you can't describe getting to know and understanding your own cycle. It really has to be tried. And only then, if you're clear that you have a window of time, that you know you're confident that you're not fertile, you can see that you're not fertile, only then can you take steps. So there's no need to be to take risks, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So it's really just coming back to, I think my main point there, Laura, is it's about informed choice. And I would really encourage everyone to, we spend a lot of time learning a lot of things, whether it's languages or learning new skills for our career, or understanding new tech or sports. Why not understand our body and our fertility? It's not hard. It's not rocket science.
I once had something prescribed for an infection that I had. I didn't know there were hormones inside. But I definitely already so soon I felt a difference, and I thought, wow, how would I respond if I took actually hormonal birth control? Because there's just a little bit in this prescribed medication here. So and I have seen me not wanting to take hormonal birth control or a copper IUD. I have been very frustrated over a few years. How do I do this? How do I have safe sex and have a sexual life, not be a nun, and do it in a way that is enjoyable, and then actually feeling forced to learn about natural fertility and buying your book. And now I'm like, how can women live without knowing this? It's hard to imagine that I was, during so many years, I wasn't aware of even those little signs of changing body smell, becoming more sensitive to smells around me, my hair that feels different. Just, there's so many signs next to the mucus that is so obvious, as you're saying. And also going back to the irregular cycles, I think it really doesn't bother me that the amount of days change now and then, because my body is so clearly showing me when my menstruation will come. So it's not about, is it 25 days or 33 days? It's about just reading the signs, and it's so empowering. Yeah. Can you tell a bit more about how you have seen the lives of couples or just individuals change with transitioning to natural birth control?
Sure.
Maybe some concrete example as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to give the concrete example of how it was for me. So this was, a few decades ago when I was 26, and up until 26, I'd had a fairly, fairly common journey through contraception. So I had been on the pill a couple of times, and I didn't feel good on it. I felt I didn't feel quite myself. So I wanted to try other things. So I tried an IUD. It wasn't a hormone releasing one at that time. There weren't any. And that worked okay, except I got a lot more period pain and a lot heavier bleeding. And then it failed. So, I wasn't so keen. So after that, a friend had recommended a diaphragm. So I got one of those, and it worked well for me. And I really liked that it was, I would use it when I needed it, and the rest of the time I didn't have it. So it wasn't in my body. So that was my favorite up until that point. And then I was working in a mixed modality clinic with a woman who had put methods of natural fertility management together, and that's what she called her business. And so I was aware of her work. I was aware of it for 2 years before I actually made an appointment. And it was a new boyfriend that encouraged, said, yeah, let's do it. I was interested, but he was also supportive. So we went to see her. And I reflected later on why had it taken me so long once I really saw what it was and that I loved it, is that nothing in my life up until that point had given me any sense that I could know my body was something as important and make choices on that knowing was something as important as contraception. There was no health professionals, certainly not my mother or teachers, probably really because they didn't know. That this was possible. So we went along. At that stage, there certainly were no apps. There were no mobile phones, no smartphones. And so we had just sheets of, paper charts to fill in, information sheets on how to check mucus, how to check the temperature, and how to fill in the charts. And so I went home and started doing that with a lot of, really active support and engagement with my partner. And I, even over the first month, by the second month, I was able to see, okay, well, there's a window of time that I'm confident that I'm not fertile. And it wasn't a very big window on either side of ovulation, but I could go, okay, this is starting to make sense to me. And over the months that increased. So what was wonderful about this for the relationship is that when I knew I wasn't fertile, when I felt really confident that I wasn't fertile, and making love at those times, I felt like there was no barrier, there was no anxiety, and it felt like really being able to. There wasn't a physical barrier like a diaphragm or a condom, but there also wasn't a chemical or a device in my uterus. I was, it felt from perhaps a tantric point of view, it felt deeply connected and intimate, and I think it really added a layer of to our shared sexuality, to our intimacy, and it added a really wonderful layer to my sense as a woman, to be able to have the power of knowing when I was fertile and when I wasn't, and also acknowledging there are times I'm not sure. So, it's important to know, okay, well, I'm not so sure there and there. And that's just then becomes counted as maybe fertile. So to be able to then make those decisions and share that with a partner was really wonderful. And but after some time, it's not really a but, and after some time, of practicing natural fertility management, the aspect that allowed me to use this method most of the time for our contraception, and then we'd use a barrier at times if I was fertile, and we wanted to make love. So that was very useful, and it really did make a change to our relationship and our intimacy. That said, ultimately that became a side benefit. The contraception aspect became a side benefit, and the real benefit was my relationship with myself. It was like this whole veil lifted, and to know myself in these different phases of the cycle. And of course, every cycle is a bit different. What I might be working through emotionally will be different. My energy is different. And each cycle will give a pattern to that. So it's like the most amazing self-development tool, just to be welcoming and respectful of it is all it takes, really. Long answer.
Beautiful answer. Yes, I love it. I'm curious if women that are taking the pill and don't feel ready yet to take the step to come off the pill, whether tracking the cycle and cycle awareness is actually possible, and whether it's helpful.
It's I think observing body changes is, is always a great learning curve. So I think if someone's, just feeling really concerned and not quite ready to take that step, sure, track the cycle. But of course, they don't have a cycle really. It's a synthetically managed cycle. They don't have a real ovulation. They don't have a real period. And they may feel different emotional stages during that. And with some, what they call mini pills, like low dose progestin pills, some women might still ovulate. And with some women might still ovulate with an IUD. But in most cases, it's disturbed, so it's not really happening. But so what I would suggest, if someone is wanting to try that, yes, definitely, just get the hang of checking mucus, get the hang of, tracking, writing down various symptoms. That definitely doesn't hurt. But I think perhaps what's more important is learning about the contraception, what you're taking, learning about beyond the little, if there's a little brochure inside the pack, go online, do some research, or get a good book and really come to understand what the symptoms are, what you're feeling on it. And if you can, even take a break to see how you feel differently. And sometimes women will start to use the pill. They might be prescribed it because they have bad period pain or irregular cycles, and that might have been years ago, so they don't really know what's my cycle going to be now. That might have been something that would settle down with getting a bit older, or it might be something that can be treated well with herbs or supplements or acupuncture, something like that. So it's worth just having a trial separation from the pill and see if you feel differently. Sometimes women, I've heard many different responses to stopping. And one might be that some women find that their emotional, instead of having an emotional flatness and feeling a bit flat inside themselves emotionally, actually finding that there's much more color in their emotional life, and that can seem, or even anger, a lot more intensity, and that can seem scary if you haven't had that for a long time. But knowing that that's more your natural self, actually getting the hang of that, and that might settle down as the drug leaves the system. But being curious, being kind, and observing during those sort of times, and getting help from natural health practitioners, can be really beneficial as well, to help in that transition phase. But I think I really applaud anyone who's looking at it and thinking about it and thinking about what else they can do, and you know, just put the time in, learn about your options, and give it a try. You know, it can be quite liberating to be able to step away from those drugs, if that's the decision for you.
This going from flat more to like intensity is my one-on-one coaching program is called Unbound Aliveness, and this full-on living, and I get so excited hearing about this. And I think, as you also said, the cycle is just the perfect guide to personal development, and going towards that fully, just embracing every aspect of life and of yourself. And yeah, I guess we're slowly wrapping up here, but what I would like to end with is, because I feel passionate about integrating the cycle in different areas, in family life, in corporate life, the office space, in you know, for me, my calendar, the healthcare maybe. And I'm curious if you dream wild, if you go wild in fantasizing, how is the cycle integrated in society? How does that look like for you?
I love this question, Laura. It's it really needs to be part of every aspect of life, of every life, and it's a key element of gender equity. So if we feel that gender equity is important for social justice, and it's a human right, then this needs to be addressed. And I'm going to come back to painting a picture in a moment. And you know, for all the ways that we're gradually unpicking patriarchy and replacing that with a society of partnership and gender equity, this is a really important, perhaps little understood part of that. So to paint a picture of what that would be like, imagine a girl in the bathroom in her house, and she's been starting to go through puberty. She notices something on the toilet paper when she goes to the toilet, and it doesn't look like poo, but it's dark, and she suddenly realizes, I think it's my period. And she calls out to her parents, and they come to the bathroom door, and she says, I think I've got my period. And she's excited, and they're excited. And then she remembers where the pads are, and she'll put one in her underwear, and she'll come out, and they'll hug her, and they'll congratulate her, and they'll talk about, maybe making her special, her favorite dinner, and who she wants to call, or whether she wants to call anyone today or maybe tomorrow. Whatever they've talked about already as a special way of celebrating. It doesn't all have to happen on that day. Maybe she just wants to kind of enjoy that space. When in the school that she goes to, it's well supported. There are facilities that make it very comfortable for girls. There's menstrual education for boys and girls, and all students. Teachers are really well trained in understanding how the language to use, how to be comfortable teaching about much more than biology and menstrual products, but also the social and emotional aspects of a menstrual cycle. So this is not just one little tucked away class, it's actually embedded in everything. So it's part of the curriculum, it's part of the culture of the school, it's supported by all the adults. And so, and boys also receive really well-rounded and respectful understanding about the menstrual cycle. So when this girl grows up and goes to university, it's the same. When she goes to work, there's support in the workplace. There's there's policies so that if she's having difficulty or menstrual problems, she knows what she can do about it, and it's a conversation she can have with her employer or the next person in line for her. So this is there's training, there are policies, and that's fine. And similarly, over the years, when a woman starts to go through peri-menopause and menopause, if she's experiencing or whatever symptoms she's experiencing, she is also well informed about that. There's a clear understanding in the health system of what menstrual well-being and menopausal well-being is, how we can practice that in our own lives, what that means in terms of healthcare. There is far better funding to be able to understand what something like, for instance, endometriosis is, how to treat it, how we can prevent it. There's been a lot more funding in that area. It's diagnosed much more quickly and easily, and so it's just, these things are understood as important. But it's just as a matter of course, and we understand what menstrual well-being is. It's not having a perfect cycle or a perfect menopause, but it's about being able to work with our bodies and use this tool of menstrual awareness to live our best life, to understand ourselves, to deepen and enrich our lives and our relationships and our creativity, through menstrual cycle awareness. So when a woman goes through menopause, it's whether she experiences few or many symptoms, it'll be the same theme. She'll understand her body. If she needs more help, she'll go to health practitioners who are well informed, well able to respect and support her through that phase, as is her workplace and her home and her family. So how do you like that for a picture of how it could be?
It's wonderful. I feel a lot of excitement in my chest right now. And I think what stands out for me as well is just, as you mentioned, in the workplace, being able to have that conversation maybe with a man, and that just being normal. And I think actually also engaging men in the cycle, also in the relationship, is very exciting for me to actually notice that when a man is curious and starts to be engaged in that, it's adding to the relationship, it's adding to the connection, it's adding to the workplace and how you're having meetings, and everyone understands that it's important, but it's also just like fun maybe, and I would love to create this together with you and with with everyone who's ready to move towards this.
And the wonderful thing is there are many steps being taken. There are many women and men working on this now, in their own part, in their own world, as are you and I. So it is, but social change takes time.
Yes.
And but for those of us who are passionate about this, I've seen change. There is change happening. Yes. It's very exciting.
Jane, how can people find you and your work? How can they learn more about you?
Sure. Probably the best is to come to, I have 3 websites that are worth looking at. One is www.fertility.com.au, and that's about my work in natural fertility management with Francesca Naish. So it's a good place to go for understanding. You can look at contraception. We've got a whole part there on on success rates and the different choices and decisions to make around contraception, as well as products that really give you all the detail and everything you need to be able to practice natural fertility management for an optimum conception or for effective contraception, natural contraception. So that's at that site. We have www.celebration-day-for-girls.com, which is about a program that we run for girls 10 to 12 years old and their mother or female carer. And that's now available in 30 countries around the world. So, and starting to be in more languages as well. So contact us if there's nothing shown in the country where you are. Contact us anyway. Sometimes we're in transition and we've got someone new, but it hasn't gone up onto the site. So do let us know. And the last website is www.chalicefoundation.org. And that is the umbrella not-for-profit organisation that manages Celebration Day for Girls. We also have blogs on there that we're putting out sort of every week on different aspects of menstruation, the menstrual cycle, from a health point of view, from a political point of view, from personal stories, culture, sports and periods, as well as menopause. So there's we're continually amazed how many different topics we can add to that. And and there's other information there. So that's probably plenty to start with.
Beautiful. Yes, and the links will be posted with this video, so you can easily find it. And I very much recommend Jane's work. I'm super grateful that you wanted to have this talk with me. Thank you for being here.
Well, my absolute pleasure. It's been delightful, Laura. It's been great to have a chat and share all these wonderful thoughts and ideas. Thank you.
Intimate breath.